Hey everybody, Mike here with another edition of Making Sense of Transformers, a series where I talk about various topics within the Transformers universe that need a little extra analysis and explanation. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe if you're new, or if you're not new and you've just never subscribed, maybe today's the day you do. You can also follow me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook to show some extra support. Now, during the run of this series, we've talked about a lot of things. Theories, what-ifs, plots, characters, and more. But while we briefly looked behind the curtain during my episode featuring Megan Fox's departure from Transformers Dark of the Moon, we've never taken a deep dive into the details surrounding the overall success, or failure, of a movie. And that's what we'll be doing today with Michael Bay's final Transformers movie, The Last Knight. If you've watched my videos before, you'll know that I'm actually a pretty big fan of the first three movies, and even the fourth to an extent. But even I, the hardcore Transformers fan, just couldn't stomach the fifth film. It was bad. So bad that I remember the exact moment I realized I hated it. There I was, sitting in my comfy reclining seat on opening night.
Alright. And here you go, Bumblebee.
Thanks, sweetie.
And right here, I thought to myself, dang, I am insanely bored. And it was unfortunately a feeling felt by many other fans of the previous films. As a fan, I realized these movies are far from perfect, but something was different this time. So what was it? The first Transformers film was released in 2007 and was met with a fairly good audience reception. It was so good that even today, after everyone hates on the franchise, it sits at a 7 out of 10 on IMDb and has an 85% positive audience score on Rotten Tomatoes. This reception catapulted it to a $70 million domestic opening, a $319 million domestic final gross, and a total of $710 million worldwide. Not bad for a 2007 release. Even after poor reviews, Transformers Revenge of the Fallen came out 2 years later with a $109 million opening, a $402 million domestic haul, and a worldwide total of $836 million. That domestic haul left the movie with the 11th spot on the all-time domestic earners list as it left theaters. The following movie, Dark of the Moon, opened the floodgates though. While the domestic numbers slightly dipped to a total of $352 million, international markets stepped in big time, especially China, which added nearly 100 million more to their total from Revenge of the Fallen. Dark of the Moon became the first Transformers movie to reach $1 billion and was the fourth highest grossing movie of all time. Age of Extinction was a definite shift for the franchise, however it still earned a lot of money, becoming the second film to break $1 billion, even though domestic numbers took an even bigger drop to $245 million. The movie was heavily marketed to the Chinese audience though, and it worked, as Chinese moviegoers flocked to the theaters. After contributing only $37 million to the first Transformers film, the country upped those numbers to a whopping $301 million for Age of Extinction. It was the highest grossing movie ever in China. Paramount Pictures obviously felt like they could do no wrong, and they felt so confident that they brought back Michael Bay and assembled a writer's room to chart out an entire Transformers cinematic universe. Transformers 5 was set to release in 2017, followed by a Bumblebee prequel the following year, and Transformers 6 the year after that. But then, The Last Knight flopped. Now, flopped might be too strong of a word, maybe underperformed is more suitable, but it drastically underperformed. China still brought in a decent $229 million, but American audiences just didn't show up, and The Last Knight limped to a worldwide total of just $605 million. Even with higher ticket prices and 3D.
I'm Optimus Prime.
Dude, I am not sitting next to you.
It had the lowest domestic opening of the 5, the lowest domestic total, and the lowest worldwide total. It was so low that Paramount had to scrap their writer's room and cinematic universe idea altogether. So what went wrong exactly? Well, it wasn't just one thing, but a perfect storm that led to a collapse as great as the fall of Cybertron. Okay, that actually might be a big exaggeration, but I just had to make the joke. I'm going to divide the problems of The Last Night into three main categories: nostalgia versus new, the writer's room, and Paramount Pictures. And to kick things off, we'll start off with the production company behind all 6 Transformers movies, and quite possibly the main core of the issues The Last Night faced: Paramount Pictures. Paramount quickly greenlit a 5th Transformers movie helmed once again by Michael Bay, but the direction they wanted to take was mixed. They continued to allow Bay to have complete free reign over the creative process, except for one main stipulation. After previous films were often deemed too long, this one would have to be shorter, less than 2 hours and 30 minutes. Was this officially released information? No, but it's pretty easy to notice. During The Last Night's trip to London, Bay filmed sequences with all of the Autobot cars. However, none of that made it into the movie. Bay later commented on how Cogman was supposed to be a headmaster, a Transformer who practically possessed the bodies of dead Transformers by becoming their head. However, that was cut as well. Our biggest hint, however, is the fact that the end credits lasted for roughly 30 seconds during its theatrical release, bringing the film to a runtime of 2 hours and 29 minutes, the second shortest runtime for a Transformers film, only behind the original 2007 film by 6 minutes. Paramount was scared by another long movie turning away moviegoers. With runtime not being an issue for home release, the end credits were re-edited from quick flashes to the classic slow crawl, adding an extra 5 minutes, equaling the runtime for 2011's Dark of the Moon. This forced runtime and an exposition-heavy story made a long movie seem not long enough, oddly making the film seem too rushed, too short, too long, too fast, and too slow all at the same time. The Last Night took a major pause halfway through the movie once Anthony Hopkins' character Sir Edmund Burton was introduced, pushing Transformers action aside for an information dump that completely changed everything known about the Transformers movie lore. It slowed down the pacing while simultaneously explaining everything too quickly, which left most moviegoers confused and bored, and it didn't help that the exposition didn't even make sense, and seemed to point toward hero character Sam Witwicky being killed off screen.
What?!
If you want to see more on that, by the way, check out my video explaining Sam's fate in the link below. So the studio forced runtime and Michael Bay's otherwise huge creative liberties were not a good mix. If you're going to hire Michael Bay to make a movie, it's best to just back off and let him do his thing. For the most part though, he did. Michael Bay, who was usually good at keeping costs down on big budget movies, pulled all the stops for The Last Night, explaining that he wanted to go out with a bang, opting to go the more expensive route for the better quality final product. After the last 2 movies made over $1 billion each, why not? The Last Night was truly Michael Bay's playground for the most part, and with his weight in Hollywood, he can get almost anything he wants, and the writers knew that. They wanted Anthony Hopkins? Done. They wanted Jim Carter as Cogman? Michael made a call. Unfortunately, that creative liberty led to some bad decisions along the way. The juvenile humor, which was really toned down for the most part in Dark of the Moon and Age of Extinction, returned in a big way, as the movie spent literally 40 seconds discussing Cade Yeager's sex life. 40 seconds.
No whoopee, Mr. Cade?
Bay's choice to film with a bunch of different alternating aspect ratios was not received well either, as most seemed to think it just made the movie look messy and inconsistent. And that messiness surprisingly ended up leaking into the action scenes, as it seemed like Bay was more worried about the quality of the image this time around, and not necessarily the quality of the scene as a whole. For a director who is often praised for his giant action sequences, the lack of extended fight scenes and a sloppy car chase felt like a shadow of his other films. Now I can easily just say the script wasn't good, people didn't like it, and move on. But I don't think it's that simple. In 2015, Paramount assembled a television-styled writer's room with a dozen writers from different backgrounds to sit together and plan out the Transformers cinematic universe. Each writer was reportedly paid around $200,000 for their time, which included visits from Hasbro, Michael Bay, and Steven Spielberg. Essentially, it was throwing a bunch of ideas at a dartboard to see if any would get a bullseye. But I think that was the problem. Daredevil writer Stephen S. DeKnight, who was one of the participants of the writer's room, said they all had a great time, but of the little I've seen of it, there seemed to be a lot of competition, rather than completely working together. If someone had a crazy enough idea, it would be used for a movie, and they'd get to write it. That's what happened with Ken Nolan, Art Markham, and Matt Holloway. It was Nolan who first brought up the use of Excalibur, which ended up being used in The Last Knight. Transformers in World War II was brought up as well, and then sloppily shoved into the second act of the movie. We did get one decent idea out of it though. Christina Hodson participated in the writer's room and brought about the idea of a Bumblebee prequel, which she went on to write. But she later said that producer Lorenzo de Bonaventura told her to not worry too much about continuity, which is strange, because if you're making a writer's room to flesh out the mythology, continuity should be pretty high on a list of priorities. The other writers seem to take this to heart too. Concept art of the World War II idea featured Megatron as a plane. That'd be kind of tough though, considering he'd be frozen in the ice at that time. Continuity? What's that? So ultimately, after the writer's room was over, and The Last Knight's 3 writers finished their script, we were left with something so full of new ideas, characters, rules, and mythology that it was just a convoluted mess. Pushing in decades of new history made fans scratch their heads, and the regular moviegoer check out completely. It was, dare I say it, too much story.
You see this? This is crazy. How detailed this is? This is like a madman who's got way too much time on his hands.
Believe it or not, Transformers had built up a bit of a nostalgia factor for some fans. The Last Knight was released a whole 10 years after the original 2007 film, and it had been 6 years since we had last seen franchise star Shia LaBeouf as Sam Witwicky. The marketing department caught wind of that. Hey, you guys remember Lennox? Well, he's back. Remember Simmons? He's back too. Bumblebee has the same design as the first 3 movies again. Remember the pyramids from Revenge of the Fallen? The Ark from Dark of the Moon? Well, we're definitely putting shots of those in the trailers. Heck, let's just use some flashbacks of Shia LaBeouf and Megan Fox in the trailers too. We asked him to come back and he said no, who cares? He's in the trailer. And I have to say that sadly, this worked on me. I was eating it up, and I know a lot of other original trilogy fans were too. But these nostalgic nods were only a small blip in the movie. The trailer shots were the full extent of the returning locations, and the returning characters were a shell of their former selves. So a lot of original trilogy fans couldn't even get on board with it. They couldn't turn a blind eye to the bad aspects of the film. Alternatively, there were new fans who came aboard during Age of Extinction, a movie very different from the first 3. It featured more personality in the Autobots and a story about the creators of the Transformers race. But that went nowhere in The Last Knight. The storyline was changed, ideas were dropped, and the Autobot cast was absent throughout a majority of the movie. The Last Knight had an identity crisis. It wasn't for the fans of the first 3, and it wasn't for the fans of the 4th. So who was it for exactly? That, coupled with poor word of mouth, sunk the movie hard. Adding on to that, the movie even lacked a hook to get people in the seats, as the other movies did. The first film lived off the hype of a live-action Transformers movie. Revenge of the Fallen lived off the hype of following up a very successful film. Dark of the Moon lived off the hype of being one of the best 3D movies of its time, and Age of Extinction used its ties to China to market to the Chinese audience. The Last Knight had none of that. Include a high-budget, poor script, confusing plot, bad word of mouth, deceptive marketing, disappointed fans, and a continuing downward spiral at the domestic box office for the 3rd straight film, and you end up with Transformers The Last Knight being a failure, both critically and for the first time in the franchise, financially. The good news is Bumblebee may have turned things around by making a decent return on a small budget, but Paramount Pictures will have to continue to prove that Transformers can still be a powerhouse at the box office. I hope you all enjoyed this latest edition of Making Sense of Transformers. Check out the previous episodes by heading to the Making Sense of Transformers playlist on my channel, and just like before, if you have another topic you'd like to see me tackle, leave a comment below. Also, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more Transformers related content, as well as checking out my gaming channel, Marlin Fan Gaming, for a different variety of videos. Signing out, I'm Mike. See you next time.